Laura Edwards is the South Dakota State climatologist with the SDSU Extension. She has worked for SDSU since 2011 and is based out of the Aberdeen Regional Extension Center. Previously, she was employed by the Western Regional Climate Center in Reno, Nevada, and was the assistant state climatologist in Maryland. Laura is a Minnesota native and now resides near Aberdeen. And with that, Laura, you can take her away.
All right, thanks, Colin, for the introduction. Yeah, there's been a lot to talk about climate-wise over the last couple of years. You guys probably are familiar with this big swing we had from 2019 to 2020, not unlike something we saw in 2011 to 2012 in South Dakota, as we went from flooding to drought in a pretty rapid turnaround. Excuse me. A quick picture here. This is from the farm where we live, and this was taken in late summer 2019, and certainly it's a big difference this year as we've seen drought even up here in the James River Basin. So we'll take a little look at some recent conditions. By recent, I mean 2020, the year to date so far. As it really seems like January was kind of a pivot point in the climate pattern that we've seen. And so I'll show kind of how this year has compared to historical conditions. Obviously, drought's a big topic currently, and then a look ahead at kind of what we are seeing on the horizon. Maybe take a look at the crystal ball at what we see for winter and spring. So a quick look back, as we've seen this big transition from very wet to very dry conditions. This picture was taken in southwestern Minnesota. Not sure if it was actually in the Big Sioux watershed or basin, but very close if not. And this was a fire that actually started by a cigarette that got thrown out into the ditch and started the whole field on fire. Really illustrating the dry conditions that we had at harvest, which good news for farmers. They had a very rapid harvest season for the most part and didn't have to worry too much about costs for extra drying at the elevator. Either at home or at the co-op. And so favorable in that way, but certainly the dry conditions we have now will carry over and at least have some impact, I think, in the early spring as we look ahead. So looking at just the calendar year so far, this is from January 1st through yesterday or through Saturday. Looking at precipitation here specifically, percent of normal precipitation. So anything in the warm colors, red, orange, yellows, or drier than average. And so you can see pretty much statewide, we've seen dry conditions this year. Looking in the eastern South Dakota area, ranging from maybe 70–80% of average for the year so far, and as low as 50 to 70% as we get closer to the Sioux Falls area, Lake, Minnehaha, McCook County area. Certainly very dry, and as you look into Iowa too. So something that we haven't seen in a while for this area. Temperature-wise, we've been slightly above average for the year so far, but certainly we've seen a lot of ups and downs with some extreme cold and extreme warmth fluctuating, especially as we saw that late summer into the fall season. And I'll talk a little bit about how this year is compared to 2012, but this is one of the big differences. And that 2012 drought in this region was much warmer than this current year. And so we'll see that when you look at total water demand or evapotranspiration, that the temperature plays a big role too in the water demand and how fast water basically leaves the soils, leaves the system that way. So So again, here we're slightly above average. You'll look at the Sioux Falls area, maybe 2 to 3 degrees above average for the year so far. But again, we've had lots of ups and downs. So looking at the Big Sioux watershed, looking at the year to date so far, how has our precipitation compared historically? And so this is looking at January through November, back to 1895. And you can first see 2018 and 19, our two previous years, really stick out there at the top of the charts with record years essentially back to back in the basin. 2017 was nothing to overlook as well. So we've had, a handful of very wet years consecutively. And that very far right bar is what you see there, where 2020 sits. So not too dissimilar from 2012. This year so far sits at 16th driest since 1895, at just under 75% of average. Average being that solid black line that goes straight across there. That orangish line is a 10-year running average. So you can kind of, you can see this upward increasing trend in precipitation over time, really since the 60s, 70s in this basin. We've had just about 8/10 more rain this year than 2012 by this time. So very close there. But you'll see, previous to 2012 even, we didn't really see really dry conditions until we look back to, the 80s, late 80s in this basin. So we've had a lot more wet conditions than dry in general in the last couple decades. This is looking at temperature, showing again we're slightly above average there in the far right line, or bar rather, in the spar graph. Had a few cool years, that coincided with the wet conditions that you probably know kind of anecdotally. But the difference, again, looking at previous drought years, you look at 2012, this high bar, is much, much warmer than what we saw just this year so far. So again, a big difference in how heat plays a role in drought development and severity. Okay, so I understand that some of you are a little more technical oriented. I don't usually share this with the more general audience, but there is there are a lot of drought indices that we keep track of. We're monitoring drought, week to week, especially for the drought monitor. But one of them that we do look at here is the Standardized Precipitation Evapotranspiration Index, or SPEI for short. So this is taking into account both rainfall or precipitation and temperature in the way of ET, or evapotranspiration, on a monthly scale. And again, showing the drought this year, worst conditions since 2012. But also that this current year, before 2012, we probably hadn't seen a similar severity of droughts probably back to the 80s there, to the late 80s. So with the exception of 2012, we haven't seen a drought like this in a while. And again, showing that increasing kind of climate trend towards a wetter climate, despite the average increase in temperatures at the same time. So translating this into soil moisture, for those of you who have seen the South Dakota Mesonet, this is what we call the poker chip map, where we have 5 soil sensors that measured both temperature and moisture at these locations. The ones that are white or blanked out don't do this measurement, but those are Mesonet weather station locations. And so this is where we're looking at now. I included the legend on the left there, where you can see this is the inches of water per inch of soil. And then each chip in the stack represents a depth of the sensor. So 2, 4, 8, 20, and 40 inches are the depths of those sensors. So they're not evenly spaced necessarily as the map looks like, but between 2 and 40 inches deep. And so the gray, if you see a gray disc color, that is frozen. So they don't report the moisture for that layer, for that sensor if it's frozen at that level. So, but you could see, you know, a lot in the Big Sioux watershed area or in the greens and blues. So, you know, 2/10 to 3/10 inches of water per inch of soil. So not too bad. But I'll show you next where we were a year ago this time. So keep an eye there on your favorite location, your favorite weather station area. And next I'll show you what we're at a year ago this time. And so I'll click ahead to that. Where we saw a lot more blues and not much frozen soil, same as currently. And we were looking at more, you know, 3/10 to 4/10 or more of soil moisture at last year at this time. So we, you know, last year this time, we also had quite a bit more snow where we had, at least in the northern part of the basin, already seen a couple big snow events by this time last year. And so we were really worried about flooding being a problem this last spring. And obviously that didn't come to fruition. But we are certainly, again, I'm going to click back here to 2020 to current measurements, starting off a little drier than previous years and maybe drier than we've seen in a little while. I'll click ahead here to 2019 again. And for those of you who are interested in the Mesonet, I will say that they just got some really great substantial funding to expand the network. So over the next 5 years, you will see a lot more Mesonet weather stations come online, pretty much statewide, with the exception of some of the higher elevations in the Black Hills. But there'll be a lot more weather stations coming online to help us get a little more detail on soil moisture, temperature, and other things above ground precipitation. So to kind of put this into perspective here, historically, this is looking at the soil moisture anomaly, how different we are from average as of the end of November. And this is from NOAA's Climate Prediction Center soil moisture products. And so you can see here, you know, right over that northwestern Iowa area, southeastern, far southeastern South Dakota, certainly much drier than average. When you look at an anomaly as far as millimeters of water for this time of year. And kind of culminating in all this is where we sit in the U.S. Drought Monitor perspective as of last Thursday. So we're looking at, you know, some level of drought almost everywhere, excuse me, almost everywhere in the basin, except for parts of the upper basin. So in the case of the drought monitor, D1, or that tan color or darker, is what they consider drought. Yellow is abnormally dry conditions, which could indicate possibly leading into drought or coming out of drought, either way. Kind of a heads up or early warning, if you might think of it that way. But that D3 extreme drought, you know, at that level, you're looking at maybe a 1 in 30 year kind of event at the D3 level. D2 is maybe a 1 in 20 year event, something similar to that. So to kind of put it in perspective how severe it is as far as the drought monitor goes. And this rapid transition is really something to think about. There's been a lot of discussion this year over flash drought. And I don't know if you guys have heard that word before, but it's something that's kind of coming into the vernacular, into the conversation a little more following our 2017 drought on the western part of the state. And this just gives an example from the start of the growing season on the left. That was April 7th drought monitor map for the region. And then where we stood kind of around Thanksgiving on the right. Since then, we have seen some more degradation in southern South Dakota, but certainly a pretty rapid ramp up to drought conditions in our area. And this is a map showing how many categories or levels of drought have changed over the last 6 months here in the region. And so using the legend there on the right, you can see, we essentially went from nothing to 3 or 4 class degradation in some parts of our area. In Minnesota, they had some earlier drought in the earlier spring that then improved, but that's mostly outside the basin, more in the Minnesota River and northward from there. So a little bit here, just looking at frost and some river that you guys are probably maybe already familiar with, but this is kind of an interesting picture I got from Stephanie Riesler down near the Vermilion area, where they were out on the river. This is in October 11th of this year, where the water is so low now that you could start to see these things uncovering again that have been buried underwater, like the old sunken ships and things like that. Just again, really interesting to see the large fluctuation in rivers this year. Looking at frost depth, we are just starting to see a few inches of frost in the basin. Really, it's been, everyone knows it's been really quite warm. With air temperatures last week, 15 to 20 degrees above average for this time of year. And so we're not seeing much frost yet. One area that, if you guys do use the Mesonet data, this can, some people translate that into what lake ice might be. Certainly we haven't seen much for lake ice yet either. And ice fishermen and others, are itching to get out there. But again, if you're interested in the frost depth information, I encourage you to check this out. Again, we're seeing just very shallow layers, and they're fluctuating quite a bit with the warm string of warm days that we've had. And then when it gets cool, it can refreeze pretty quickly. Missouri River storage. I'm guessing many of you probably have access to this too, but looking at the Army Corps updates, the Army Corps' flood forecasting in the spring is primarily what's driving this expansion in the Mesonet and the weather station network. And they are the primary sponsors to kickstart the big expansion of weather stations. I believe will be over 100 new weather stations in South Dakota to help improve primarily on the plains what their snowpack and precipitation is, and including in the winter season. So hopefully they can continue to make improvements both with NOAA, snow monitoring, and the Army Corps' flood outlooks through the Mesonet expansion. But here you could see, again, we're much below where we were at last year this time, and below 2011 at this time as far as storage on the river overall. But runoff for the year will still be above average, partly due to the earlier part of the season that was kind of wet or carryover wet. Again, we've seen kind of near normal stream flow over the last month, despite the very kind of primarily dry conditions, but still seeing kind of near average stream flow. But I think the trend is we've seen some very rapid declines in the Big Sioux River in particular over the latter part of the fall season. So looking ahead, will we continue to see warmer conditions? Are we going to see some snow like this? And La Nina is the biggest story, or the biggest player, I should say, maybe, in the winter season. But I'll look out ahead here towards spring even. So this is the latest on La Nina. Just to explain this bar graph a little bit. The blue bars are the likelihood of La Nina. The red bars are the likelihood of El Nino. And the gray bars are likelihood or probability of neutral, which is neither one of those. You see the probability scale on the left side. So La Nina conditions are in play right now and will dominate us through the spring, where you see the months there on the bottom. NDJ is November, December, January. DJF, December, January, February, and so on. So you see the blue bars really hanging in the majority until the spring season, March, April, May, which is very common, that El Nino or La Nina peter out pretty fast in the spring season. They're primarily a winter phenomenon up here in our part of the world. Also, along with that, they're also NOAA is forecasting a strong to moderate strength La Nina, and so I know this might be small for those of you who are on a smaller screen, but looking at the top two rows and the first three in the third row, those are historically the strong and moderate La Ninas, and the winter temperatures, if they've been warmer or cooler than average, and you see really a mixed bag of some very warm years and some very cold years historically with La Nina. More often than not, we do see colder temperatures in December, January, February. But this year, certainly December is going to be warmer than average. So we could still see this happen, though, if we see a turn towards colder, even in January, February. So there's a lot of winter left for things to turn around and could go colder. But again, just to show that La Nina itself is not always consistent, kind of consistent, but not always consistent up here. The last La Nina year we had was the winter of 2016 to 17 and 17 to 18. On the precipitation side here, looking at the top three rows or so of strong to moderate strength La Ninas in the winter season, just doesn't tell us a whole lot by itself, but a lot of climate models are pointing towards a more active weather pattern, more active storm pattern in the latter winter up here. So if you do see the official NOAA outlook, which I'll show in a little bit, they are leaning towards wetter than average, especially January, February, March. But La Nina by itself doesn't necessarily tell us that. All right, so looking at the near term here and kind of going out to winter, next 7 days, really pretty quiet. We see some chances here at the end of the week into early next week, but those green areas are still less than a half inch of precipitation. Typically we estimate if it's going to be snow, maybe a 10-to-1 ratio, so a half an inch of liquid could be 5 inches of snow if it falls as snow. So keep an eye on the weather outlook because it does look like some system coming through this later part of this week. Next 2 weeks in general, though, warmer than average. Looking at the left map there, odds leaning towards warmer than average, through the middle of December. This system or wetter weather we might see over the weekend, early next week, may not hang around too long. Will kind of come and do its thing as far as weather goes, and then kind of pass away off in the distance. So I don't think that wet pattern is going to stick around too long for us down here. And then overall for December, this is what came out about a week ago. Really, the early part of December is so warm. Even if we turn colder at the end of the month, pretty unlikely that the month overall will be colder at all. So that's where we're looking at, obviously warmer than average temperatures in December. On the right, though, looking at drier conditions in general, average precipitation for December is just about a half of an inch. So if we see some precipitation in the next week, 2 weeks, And that's it. That could be below average. That might just be it. So we'll see, but it looks like primarily dry really over the heart of the country here. And this is the 3-month outlook for the winter overall. That has a very heavy La Nina influence in it. As is seeing on the left there, colder than average temperatures favored, in the northern Dakotas and Montana, and the wetter than average slightly favored in the northern part of South Dakota. Thanks, Colin. I see your note there. And this is something that we see kind of hanging in to the spring. So this is as we look towards March, April, and May. Again, slightly favoring colder than average temperatures, but that goes further north, kind of not so much in the Big Sioux River watershed, and less likely on the wetter side into that March, April, May period. So some chance that we could get a snowpack and still recover our soil moisture if the temperature and the melt season works out just right. But I think overall, for at least the farming interests, timely rains are going to be much more important as we get into the spring season. As we see, the drought outlook really hanging on to some of that drought through the winter season. Again, it's our driest season climatologically speaking. So it's really pretty tough to really come out of drought in the winter. Might see slight adjustments up or down, but in general, we don't see a lot of big change in the drought situation over that winter season. And this map would be through February, through the end of February. Here is my contact information. If you guys want to reach out, I'm also on Facebook and Twitter. I'm crossing fingers that we don't see too much increase in severe drought or flood this coming year. And for those of you who do keep track of the NOAA releases, the third Thursday of every month is the monthly and that 3-month outlook release. And usually in the spring around March, they do their official river flood outlook. So keep eyes out for that as well as we get later into the spring. So Colin, that's all I have for now. I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
Yeah, I haven't seen any use of the chat function, so I don't know if anybody wants to jump in. We do have a couple of minutes for questions. We hope to give people enough time to jump into the next track, which I will post the links here in just a second for you guys. But I feel free to type a question in the chat, and I'll be able to ask Laura any questions you have. Looks like you mentioned funding for Mesonet. Will that mean more stations this year, or is that a couple of years out?
Yep, so the Mesonet funding, they will start installing stations next year in 2021, and when it gets warm again. And I believe it's about 20 some stations they're anticipating the first year to be installed. So yeah, it's a 5-year project, and I forget, I want to say it's about $10 million, something like that. So they're really excited about the new information that'll be coming out with that data.
Perfect. We can give people a few seconds to think of some questions here before they start leaving to other rooms, but I did post the links for everyone to use again. Looks like it worked out great the first time around, so hopefully it continues that way for you all.
Yeah, we'll add on the Mesonet expansion, that's actually the whole upper Missouri River Basin, not just South Dakota. So they're really trying to target all the water coming in above Sioux City on the plains. So it's about $48 million overall with 5 states.
Oh, okay.
So Colin introduced me, but once again, my name is Brett Steers. I'm an engineer with the DENR in Pierre. And in this discussion this afternoon, I'm going to be talking about some updates and some upcoming changes with regards to the DENR statewide permitting world, specifically our industrial stormwater permit, and give you some overview, background, and some context about what's been going on with the DENR and specifically with our DENR industrial stormwater permit moving forward. So just a quick overview of what's going to be discussed in this discussion. I'm going to give you some background, some context on the origins of the DENR industrial stormwater permit. We're going to be talking about some other items, which include our need for why we need to meet the industrial stormwater annual fees, getting into discussing what the actual fees themselves will look like. And then lastly, we'll wrap up with a discussion quickly about some of the actual items that are currently being updated, including our online application system, which has been going live for about a month now. So give some updates and some information. So if you are out there in the industry looking to use, or if you're a permittee that has permit coverage underneath our DENR general industrial stormwater permit, provide you some context and some background so you can understand where we're coming from as a state regulatory agency and how it can be applied to you, whether you're just curious for information or, like I said, if you are a permittee and it's going to directly affect you. So quick 30,000 feet of the origins of how we started the DENR actually permitting our industrial stormwater permit. Back in 1972, EPA came out with and Congress came out with the Federal Clean Water Act. And essentially for our sake, what this act did was provide some framework and some structure for how states and how the EPA and nationwide as a whole need to regulate discharges through permitting programs, through water quality standards, through water quality criteria. And it ultimately led to the creation of what is called the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. And this essentially provides, once again, the framework for how we need to actually permit discharges and permit sites to prevent any adverse effects to the environment moving forward. Then in 1993, EPA delegated the authority to administer the NPDES program to the state of South Dakota. And during that delegation, they administered the authority for us to start implementing specifically general permits for construction stormwater discharges associated and industrial stormwater permits. The construction stormwater permit specifically discusses and regulates construction activities that are disturbing, doing land disturbing activities, things of that nature. And the industrial stormwater permit discusses and regulates industrial facilities throughout the state of South Dakota to minimize impacts associated with that discharge from that industrial facility. And the way that we regulate this permit throughout the state is through a couple different mechanisms. We do it by implementation of best management practices and procedures. We also, the permit itself discusses how to reduce potential industrial exposures. So you can think of it as reducing exposure if you have a chemical tank or fueling tank, reducing the exposure with maybe putting a cover on top of that tank. So there's not going to be any potential mixture or stormwater discharges, stormwater mixing with potential discharges from that tank or spills from that tank. Whereas we also regulate how to minimize runoff from the industrial activities. So instead of putting a cover on top of a tank, you can think about minimizing runoff from that tank in terms of putting some type of secondary containment around it to make sure there's not going to be any adverse effects from your industrial stormwater runoff leaving your facility. In the permit, we also discuss proper handling of storage and materials. And then our permit also has specific requirements for how to deal with spill response and how to deal with spill containment. And I've used the word a couple times now, just so we're all on the same page. We've been talking about the industrial stormwater general permit and the construction stormwater general permit. And what we mean by a general permit is that our general permits are usually 5 years in a time frame, and they cover a wide range of facilities. So they cover multiple facilities throughout the entire state. So we're not just talking about one specific facility located in Sioux Falls or one specific facility located in Pierre. We're talking about covering hundreds upon hundreds of facilities. And we do that through this general permit. And a general permit is essentially a mechanism for how to cover multiple facilities under one specific permit. And we do this by public noticing one permit that has general rules, general requirements that apply to multiple facilities. And then each individual facility will then apply to have coverage underneath the general permit. And they do this by submitting what is called a notice of intent to obtain permit coverage, and then they can submit a notice of termination to terminate the permit coverage. So it's important to point out here, and the point I'm trying to make here is that the general permit lives outside of a specific facility. The general permit will be in effect throughout the duration of, say, a life of a facility. A facility can voluntarily obtain permit coverage and then terminate their permit coverage based on their site-specific determination whether or not they need permit coverage. And specifically here in the state of South Dakota, we do have an industrial stormwater permit. It has been administratively continued since September 30th, 2017, and it originally became effective back in October 1st of 2012. And currently there's approximately 850 permitted sites underneath the industrial stormwater permit. And now that you're kind of getting some framework and background on what exactly is covered by this permit, there's obviously a number of different types of industrial operations, a number of different types of industries throughout the state of South Dakota. So specifically, our permit and EPA requirements call out what types of facilities that need to have coverage, and the determination of which types of facilities need to have coverage is based off of the primary SIC code of that industry. SIC code, if you're unfamiliar, it stands for Standard Industrial Classification, and it basically categorizes how facilities are, what types of activities they perform at their actual facility. And it's a 4-digit code. And based off of these SIC codes, EPA requirements and our general permit requirements require hundreds upon hundreds of SIC codes to obtain, or facilities with SIC codes to obtain coverage underneath our general permit. With hundreds upon hundreds of facilities required to have coverage and SIC codes that require coverage, EPA has taken this a step further. Rather than just saying these 100 facilities need to have coverage, they started categorizing these SIC codes into groups to kind of better understand trends and understand what's been actually going on from industry to industry and what specific water quality criteria and pollutants of concern are in this industry versus that industry. So EPA has gone forward and categorized all the SIC codes that are required to obtain coverage into 30 specific industrial sectors. And here is a list of the 30 sectors. As you can see, it covers everything from timber products to numerous types of manufacturing processes, to textile facilities, to repair yards, to salvage yards, to coal mines, to sand and gravel operations, to gold mines. Things covers all different types of industries. And specifically, I want to point out Sector J. Sector J covers all the facilities that are considered to be non-metallic mineral mining and processing facilities. So you can think of some of these as those sand operations, sand and gravel operations, mining operations. And like I said in the previous couple slides, there's currently 850 permitted sites underneath our industrial stormwater permit in the state of South Dakota. In Sector J alone, just one out of the 30 sectors covers approximately 525 of our permitted sites. So 525 out of 850, approximately 62% of our permitted facilities are covered underneath the sand and gravel, or covered under the Sector J sand and gravel category. So with that in mind, I'm going to take a step back and kind of discuss the DENR and how we've been implementing this general permit for the past couple of years. Since the delegation from EPA in 1993, we have not, from the delegation from EPA in 1993 through 2018, we did not administer a single stormwater related fees for permit coverage underneath our construction stormwater permit or our industrial stormwater permit. However, in recent years leading up to 2018, EPA grant money and grant assistance had been steadily declining. So that led our DENR to not be able to fill vacant positions, not be able to perform the number of EPA required inspections per year on our construction stormwater facilities and our industrial stormwater facilities. Additionally, we had a number of operations, both covered by industrial stormwater permit and our construction stormwater permit, that went unpermitted. We just simply did not have the manpower to effectively enforce our permit and make sure that everyone that is required based off of their SIC code for the industrial activity or required based off of our requirements in our construction permit, there was a number of facilities that just were not obtaining permit coverage or did not know they needed to obtain permit coverage. And specifically with our industrial stormwater permit, I pointed it out, our permit has been administratively continued since September 2017, so a little over 3 years now, and we have not been able to get around to administer reissuing that industrial stormwater permit. So with all this in mind, our program said as a whole, we need a new funding source. We need a stable funding source that can effectively allow us to implement and administer these construction stormwater permit and industrial stormwater permit, and do so in a way that's independent and has our own funding source. So in 2018, we went before the South Dakota State Legislature and got Senate Bill 25 approved, which essentially authorized us to start collecting fees for our construction stormwater permit and our industrial stormwater permit. And during the 2018 legislative session, we had already been in the process of renewing our construction stormwater permit and already been doing some stakeholder feedback, outreach and discussion about the renewal of that permit. So we had a little bit of a head start on the construction side of things. So in Senate Bill 25, we directly or specifically incorporated our construction stormwater proposed fee system and fee structure directly into Senate Bill 25. And with that, we got it directly included in Senate Bill 25. So we were able to start implementing our construction stormwater fees, the fees associated with that general permit, in July of 2018. However, we just weren't, as a department, with the lack of resources, lack of staff, we just weren't in the position to implement our industrial stormwater fees at the same time while Senate Bill 25 was being approved through the legislature. So with that, Senate Bill 25 authorized us to implement these industrial stormwater fees, the fees associated with the industrial stormwater general permit, through administrative rule. And specifically, Senate Bill 25 required that we assess a tiered system to cover our industrial stormwater fees. I'm going to specifically call that out. We are required to have a tier system. During our stakeholder feedback and essentially the build up to the 2018 legislative session, we did some outreach about how we need to structure our fees. And we were originally proposing to have just a flat fee for our industrial stormwater fees. We were just going to say everyone that has a permit, all 850 facilities that have a permit, you can just pay, everyone pays X amount of fee on an annual basis. The stakeholder feedback that we got in the build up to the 2018 legislative session seemed to indicate, and there was an overwhelming majority that seemed to indicate that that would not be fair for certain facilities that have less industrial stormwater exposure per se, or more industrial stormwater exposure, or facilities that are required to do more, facilities that don't have as many potential sources of industrial stormwater contamination. So that is why Senate Bill 25 specifically required that we have a tiered system to equitably assess an annual fee to cover the wide range of facilities that are required to be covered underneath our industrial stormwater permit. Like I said, we were ready at the time to move forward with our construction stormwater fees, and we started implementing those in July 2018. Those fees were also tiered. That tier for our construction permit was based off the disturbed acreage of the construction project. The more acreage you have disturbed, the higher annual fee you would have to pay on an annual basis. And with those fees, since July 2018, we've been able to do several things. We finished reissuing our construction stormwater permit. Like I said, we were in the process. We kind of just got that completed just at the end of the 2018 legislative session. Additionally, we were able to fill 2 staff vacancies, me being one of the 2. I've started shortly after the approval of Senate Bill 25, and that's how my position was able to be filled. Additionally, we implemented a new training program. In years past, we had sporadic trainings in conjunction with the South Dakota Department of Transportation, where we would come in at a random training or one-off training and have a 30-minute discussion about 30,000 feet, discussion about our general permit requirements for our construction permit, and a generic discussion about what we require. But we felt a 30-minute discussion once a year to an audience of 40, 50, 60 people was not sufficient. So with that, we moved a step further. We continued to partner with the South Dakota DOT, and the last year we started increasing our involvement with that training. And last year we spoke for approximately 4 hours, 4.5 hours on our construction stormwater requirements. So getting into much greater depth, and we were able to speak at more trainings. So just the first step for us in implementation of a new and expanded training program, which we're hoping to further expand. Additionally, with the construction stormwater annual fees that we received for 2.5 years now, we've been able to implement an online permit application, an online permit application fee payment system. This will better enable us to get people permitted properly, get our annual fee payments done in a timely fashion, so we're not going to be wasting resources on over the phone payments or online payments or receiving a check by mail, things like that. We also, in the past year or so, we've developed a new database to better manage our construction permits and better track our online fees and our online application system. And lastly, with our new construction stormwater fees, we've been able to comply with EPA inspection requirements. Each year, EPA sets forth a certain percentage or a certain number of inspections for our construction sites that we have to go out and inspect. And within the past 2 years, we have been able to meet that once again because we started enforcing and issuing fees associated with our construction stormwater permit. So moving forward, our planned usage for these industrial stormwater fees would enable us to firstly reissue that industrial stormwater general permit, which once again has been administratively continued since September 2017. Additionally, we would be able to create a non-metallic mining and processing facilities general permit. So this is back in reference to that Sector J, which I said has approximately 62% or 525 of our currently permitted 850 facilities. Not only does the Sector J have a specific requirement for the type of activities it is and the number of facilities that are included there, it also, non-metallic mineral mining and processing facilities, they operate very distinctly different from normal industrial operations and from the industrial operations that are covered by the other 29 sectors. And we as a DENR feel like we're not doing a very sufficient job at regulating the non-metallic mineral mining and processing facilities, those Sector J sand and gravel operations. You can think of it in that context. So moving forward, we're looking to create a new separate general permit to cover those 525 facilities to have specific requirements that deal specifically with sand and gravel operations, rather than trying to cover it under the same permit as a textile manufacturing facility or a product manufacturing facility. Additionally, with these industrial stormwater fees, we'd be able to provide more technical assistance. We'd be able to implement a training program similar to what we've been trying to do with our construction stormwater permit. We would also be able to conduct more inspections. And lastly, it would allow us to retain control and the delegation from EPA to implement these stormwater fees. So when EPA delegated the authority to administer these permits to us in 1993, it came with a caveat or the understanding that they will still have oversight of how we implement the program, and they can step in at any point in time and take back over our implementation of this program. And from our standpoint and from the EPA standpoint, that's not something that either one of us or EPA, wants to do. EPA doesn't want to administer this permit out of Region 8 from Denver, Colorado, trying to implement and effectively regulate this industrial stormwater permit. So having our own stable fee source will allow us to retain control by doing all the things that I mentioned above. So the fee structures themselves, we are looking to implement 2 distinct fee systems with 5 tiers each. The first is for that Sector J, the non-metallic mineral mining and processing facilities. We would have 5 tiers structured based on the unreclaimed acreage of the mining operation. So larger unreclaimed acreage, larger annual fee. And then the second system of fees that we're proposing is for the other 29 sectors. And that covers, once again, the other 325 currently permitted facilities. And those 5 tiers are going to be structured based off of the potential environmental impact. So the Sector J, non-metallic mineral mining and processing facilities, this is the proposed tier structure that we're looking to move forward with. So any site that has less than 1 acre of unreclaimed land will have an annual fee of $100. Then 1 to 20 acres is $200, 20 to 40 is $400, and 40 to 80 acres is $600. And then any sites that have over 80 acres of unreclaimed mining acreage is going to have an annual fee of $800. Then for our other 29 sectors, here is a breakdown and table of our proposed fee structure. And once again, we are proposing this tier structure for the facilities with a higher potential for environmental impact and higher potential for industrial stormwater runoff or potential impacts from industrial stormwater runoff. The facilities that are paying the highest annual fee are those that have the highest potential. So you can see down in Sector 5, some of those metal mining, ore mining, those gold mining facilities, in addition to coal mining operations and oil and gas operations. Those facilities we feel fairly will be paying the highest annual fee. And then we scale it back. $600 includes hazardous waste treatment in addition to landfills and land application sites. And then going all the way back up to the lowest tier, tier 1, that is going to be paying $100 on an annual fee. These facilities mainly include manufacturing facilities that, if any potential for industrial stormwater or industrial stormwater contamination, there's going to be an oil drum or there's going to be a fueling tank. So there's very minimal impacts, if any. Therefore, we decided to have those facilities be only required to pay an $100 annual fee. And quickly, I'll just go through a timeline in terms of our implementation of these industrial stormwater annual fees. From August through September of this year, we did some outreach with several industry stakeholders to get an idea of what specifically they are looking for in their opinions on our proposed fees. Then in October, we received permission from the state's Water Management Board to public notice our proposed fees. Then we public noticed our proposed fees from October 28th through November 28th of this year. And we proposed those proposed rules, those breakdowns of all the tables and the fee structures and everything like that. We received some public comment. We made a couple proposed changes based off of some comments that we received from Pete Lean and Sons, and then also that we received from Nordstrom Automotive. And then thirdly, we received a couple comments from the state's Legislative Research Council. And after those proposed changes, we spoke before the state's Water Management Board once again on December 2nd, just last Wednesday, and received their approval on the proposed rules to move forward and start the actual implementation of these fees. So the next two things that I've highlighted and bolded are our proposed and our expected timeline moving forward. We have a couple more hurdles to go through on the back end and the legal side of things to get approval and signing off from the state's Legislative Rules Committee and Interim Rules Committee. Then we're going to do some further outreach with the permitted facilities and the facilities that are currently unpermitted that need to get permitted throughout the spring and summer, and then start invoicing in the fall. And we expect to send out our invoices and receive our first annual fee payments for our industrial stormwater fees in January 2022, so just over a year from now. So this kind of provides a quick summary of what has been going on so far with our industrial fees implementation. Additionally, I wanted to talk about one specific tool as we're moving forward with this fees implementation and doing some outreach and trying to get unpermitted facilities up to speed. And as we're looking forward to move forward with invoicing and contacting these 850 facilities again, we decided that we need to move forward and implement an online tool to help our permitted facilities and our permitted industrial world to understand and better access their permitting requirements. So we partnered with EPA this past year to implement an online electronic reporting system, application system, which includes not only our applications, it will include permit terminations, permit transfers. If any facilities have old permit contacts, they can go in and update those then and there. Additionally, we're working on implementing a way that facilities can submit annual reports. If they have any sample data that's required by our industrial stormwater permit, they can submit that online rather than sending a hard copy via mail. So we think with this online tool, it'll just better regulate our facilities and it'll be more seamless for them, in addition, more to better use for our resources as well. We partnered, like I said, we partnered with EPA and their consultants to government and industries, CGI, and we've decided to go through this online tool through EPA's Central Data Exchange website, CDX. And we went live with this online portal, online submission system in November 2020, so just over a month ago. And right now, the features that we have live are our application system, our termination system, if anyone's looking to be transferring their ownership or updating contacts, all that has been live for the past month. And we're looking to have that final piece, the annual report system, be live by January 2021. That way, coming forward for the next year, facilities can start submitting their annual sampling data to us on an online system. So that's just a quick summary of everything that the DENR has been going through this past couple months, past couple of years. And looking forward, if anyone has any questions or comments, I'd be happy to answer them now. And that is all I have for you folks. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Brett. A reminder to anybody who might be new to the group, you can post your question in the chat in the bottom right, and I will see it and I can relay it to Brett if that is something you would like to do. So by all means, post a question in the chat and I can ask it. If not, I have a question or two I can ask Mr. Brett. So ask away. Well, Brett, I'll start with mine. I guess mine is probably what you've been asked a ton, is just implementation now. With obviously it's on your radar to kind of update and refresh these industrial rules and kind of just get out there more in general. How long do you think it's going to take to kind of refresh that general permit that has a lot of, I guess some would say there's some gray areas that hopefully can get vetted out in that permit, and just, inspections and how those really will start to look in the years to come?
So for the last part of the question, in terms of the DENR's inspections, currently as it stands, EPA sets a certain percentage of required inspections each year. The past couple of years, we've been barely achieving 10% of what has been required by EPA. So we're looking to not only meet the rest of that 90% on an annual basis, but hopefully exceed it in the next year or two moving forward with just more resources, and specifically for our industrial stormwater permit, because it's been kind of kicked to the back burner, trying to get our construction sites and all of that under compliance and have a greater overarching scope and awareness, public awareness of what is required by our construction permit. So hopefully with our inspections, we can start reaching our quotas set forth by EPA in the next couple of years. And specifically with the reissuance of the permit, like I said, we're going to be breaking apart the industrial stormwater permit to cover the sand and gravel operations, the non-metallic mineral mining operations separately. And we're looking to move forward with both of those permits. I would say probably within the next year, probably 2 years max.
That's good. You'll have to put those both out for public comment once you get those initial updates done, right?
Correct. And at least in the months leading up to the public comment and the formal public notice period, we would go forward and have further stakeholder input and send out some general information about our proposed changes, proposed structure, things like that. So there'll be information forthcoming at least a couple months prior to public notice, and even more months prior to the actual issuance or reissuance of these permits.
Gotcha. Looks like we got another question here. What is the biggest opportunity you see in the industrial stormwater inspections once you get those going?
I think our biggest challenge and therefore our biggest opportunity is to just effectively convey what all is required by this permit. There's a number of facilities that they might have heard through the grapevine that they're required to obtain coverage. So they just sent in the notice of intent. It's just a 2-page form, and that probably is the beginning and end of their compliance, or what they feel is their compliance with the permit. So I think our greatest room for improvement, our greatest opportunity is to get out there, have those personal connections, those personal conversations where we can kind of talk through things generally and holistically what we're expecting of facilities moving forward. And I think that'll at least lay the framework and groundwork for having advanced conversations moving down the road at a higher depth or more greater detail.
And just as a reminder, folks, the links are again in the chat for you. So any of you latecomers can use the links again, just like you have the last couple of times. So just wanted to insert that in there for you. But we do have, there's still a minute or two left of Brett's time if anybody wants to ask him anything about industrial permits or construction site permits. So I can give you a couple more seconds to think about something and maybe post something in the chat for me to ask. So I will do a quick introduction of these two gentlemen for all of you. Jason Lindquist is a director of environmental affairs at Smithfield Foods. He graduated from the University of Minnesota, Morris, with a bachelor's degree in biology at the College of St. Scholastica with a master's degrees in management. Jason has worked in the environmental field for the past 22 years across the public and private sector. He came to Smithfield in 2019, where he supports several Smithfield Foods activities, including the Sioux Falls facility. As a member of the Sioux Falls community, Jason has shared a desire to ensure the continued sustainability of the Sioux Falls facility here. And Mr. Todd Gackstetter is Director of Engineering and Maintenance for Smithfield Foods here locally. He graduated from South Dakota School of Mines and Technology with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. Todd has worked in facility engineering for over 35 years and with Smithfield since 2014. So with that, gentlemen, you can take it away.
There we go. I just gave the introduction to a muted phone, so I apologize for that. Thanks for having us. We're excited to share some of the things that Smithfield is doing, both across the country and within the Sioux Falls community towards our sustainability and water quality. So we'll just get started. Come on. Just got to be smarter than the. There we go. All right. Smithfield has a commitment to sustainability, and we have a number of different sustainability goals where I myself am going to focus on the environmental goals and targets that we have. So as a company, 100% compliance 100% of the time, it's a hallmark of what we're trying to do here at all of our locations across the company. It's not just a tagline, it's really what our goal and our expectation for the facilities are. Along with that, we have an overall goal to reduce our natural resource demand. And this really tries to focus ourselves on finding innovative solutions to help us optimize it, whether it's across the supply chain through reducing waste and improve our energy and water efficiency across our plants. And so we're doing a number of really cool things across lots of our facilities. And so kind of the way this is going to work is I'll talk around some of our corporate initiatives, and then Todd is going to be helping add some color commentary to the Sioux Falls portion of it. As a company, we're working towards zero waste to landfill. This is a target that we have, which we want to reduce 75% of the total solid waste that's sent to the landfills. And in addition to that, have 75% of our facilities be certified as zero waste to landfill. So currently, I guess when you take a look at year-over-year numbers last year, 2018 to 2019, we saw a 29% reduction in total solid waste to the landfill. And in addition, if you look at based on our baseline year, which is 2010, we're over 50%. We have over a 50% reduction in our total amount of solid waste that's going to the landfill. We are, in addition to that, 16 of our 48 plants are currently certified as zero waste to landfill, and we have 4 or 5 of them that are looking to start the process in 2021. It's a rigorous process where we identify where all of our wastes are going, and then once we have achieved a zero waste to landfill, we require the facility to demonstrate that for a full year before they are certified as a zero waste to landfill. We do this in a number of different ways. It's partnerships with our recyclers. We utilize beneficial use opportunities, and then there is a portion of our refuse that we utilize typically waste to energy facilities to help turn the waste that we have left over that can't be used otherwise into energy. Another highlight from last year is that we had one of our full harvest facilities. So that's a facility very similar to ours here in Sioux Falls in Vernon, California, which is in the LA area, but they became zero waste to landfill, and that's quite an accomplishment for a large facility like that to be able to achieve that zero waste to landfill certification. So
Okay, well, I think, jumping into working towards zero waste, where we're at in the Sioux Falls area, we've got a biosolids application program. We started it in 2012. And we've got 2,400,000 pounds per month that we are doing a land application on. That is the biosolids coming off from our wastewater area. So that is it's created a 75% reduction in our solid waste to landfill system, and that was a huge program that is working very well for us. So, one of the other major things we're doing is the cardboard recycling. We are currently separating and maintaining the cardboard recycling. We do about approximately 450,000 pounds per month of cardboard recycling. And so that's been also a huge thing in getting us to reduce the landfill quantity.
The biosolids program is it's one that we use across a number of our facilities, especially here in the upper Midwest. Used as a soil amendment, it's actually a fairly sought after. Farmers want the product to go on their field. It's a good way to make their soils better. We follow agronomic application rates, and so whether it's at the Sioux Falls facility or Crete, Denison, that's pretty cool program. So, oops, too many slides. There we go. Just to. Moving on to our air emissions and some energy items that we have as a company, we're working towards a 5% reduction in global energy use across our farms and our facilities, along with a 25% reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions across the supply chain. Let's see, at our Tar Heel, North Carolina facility, we have a renewable natural gas facility where we take the methane that's produced off anaerobic lagoons, and we scrub that gas up and we turn it into renewable natural gas, which is actually injected into the pipeline. It's a program that eliminates those greenhouse gas emissions, and it uses it as a fuel instead. In addition, we have some manure to energy biogas installations in North Carolina, Missouri, Virginia, and Utah. We recently have partnered with the company Dominion Energy to cover our lagoons in our North Carolina and Virginia and collect these locations and also turn them into renewable natural gas. So that's a significant project that we've done.
The next program we've got, the air emissions and energy conversion. So similar on the biogas here, we're actually using that biogas to go through our boiler system. So we've got an 11% natural gas is displaced by the biogas produced in our current anaerobic lagoons. And we take that gas, the photo on there actually shows the containment we're using, and that will capture the gas, and then we actually send that through our boiler system and burn that gas. It is overall gives us a 3% energy reduction across the plant in our total energy, but an 11% reduction in gas. So some of the projects we're going to talk about also, we've got the anaerobic gas collection we just talked about. Greenhouse gas is we're containing that greenhouse gas emission. Our odor reductions. So in the last year, we've actually replaced a lot of systems, kind of gone through what we can do to control our odor. So we've done approximately $1 million project, and it controls the emissions from our rendering area. So animal feed area, and we're going through a wet scrubber system, and that actually will knock down the odors and then send everything through full containment on that. And that's both, we control the room air, go to a negative room air, and then we control any exhaust based out of that area. The animal feed odor control is kind of the same. It's all the way across that whole system. We did add, in the last couple of years, we've added an economizer system on the boilers, and what that does is just, we're reclaiming that heat. That goes back into our feed water systems, and that's reclaiming the heat off the exhaust for those boilers. The next one we're talking about, this one ties a little closer into the Big Sioux, is our hot water tank installation. So the photo shows a picture of the 500,000 gallon tank that we are right in the process of starting that up right now. What that does is reclaim, so we are reclaiming the heat from the animal feeds area, and we use that heat to heat up our water that we're using for sanitation here. So it's, like we said, it's a 500,000 gallon tank. It is filled throughout the day, so we consume more than the 500,000 gallons per day. And that should help us, significant reduction in the amount of water and also the amount of heat required to heat up that water that we're doing right now. The next process, we've got the animal feed barns. We have added, those are complete now. We added those in the last couple of years. We do have an underground water storage system for the stormwater system. It's approximately 354,000 gallons for underwater retention, and that's to capture anything prior to discharge. So that system is kind of disappeared throughout. If anybody's driven by the facility lately, you've noticed that that whole area has been concreted, and then we've also asphalted the road coming in. So we are capturing all that water right now. And then the water reuse system, we've got several small things, and I'm just going to hit on a couple of the major ones, but we do reuse our water in several different areas in the facility. So if it's a secondary water where it's picked up heat, if it's still clean, we may send it through another area for that. We are taking some of the water that goes through a certain process that we can actually run it for, whether it's washing floors in the wastewater area, any cleanup stuff on some of the buildings where it's a non-potable type system. We do use that in several different things. We do single cooling water. We will recycle that. Hydraulic cooling packs, so forth. We will recycle all that. And then in the harvest facility, we've got a couple areas where we can actually use non-potable water in several spots. So now probably the most exciting thing we're going to talk about today is our wastewater upgrade. One of the proposals we're going to jump into here, which we'll kind of run through that right now.
So the facility, we received a new NPDES permit on April 21st, 2020. It was effective on July 1st. In essence, there was, a number of different changes that were across there, but the big hitters for it were that we saw some pretty substantial reductions in ammonia and nitrates for the facility that are required by June 30th, 2023. On ammonia, it's a 36% reduction in the most stringent month of August that's in our permits. And then nitrates, it was across the board, a daily limit of 88 milligrams a liter and a monthly limit of 50 milligrams a liter, where we didn't have a limit on nitrates before. We were just monitoring it. So with this, these new requirements require the addition of a denitrification step as well as some increased nitrification capacity so that we can meet these discharge limits. And we'll go through the whole wastewater system and show you what the changes that we're planning on making are. But one of the other things that we're going to be doing in this project is we're going to be moving the outfall downstream of the current discharge location on the Big Sioux River. So it's moving downstream probably about 300 yards. So this is just an overview of the system. I figured give an aerial view of where our wastewater treatment system is, and then a P&ID or a drawing showing what the new system is going to look like. So we'll break each of these into smaller pieces.
Fold a little bit more.
So I think so the first part that we have is the existing pretreatment system. So this is taking the wastewater that's coming from the plant, and we run it through some grit collection, and then through rotary screens, and then we go through DAF, a dissolved air flotation units, which help us get all of the suspended solids out. It helps remove probably 60 to 70% of the TSS and 30% of the BOD, 35% of the BOD. This is really to, and then we take those solids and we run them through a press system, and those are used, that's part of our biosolids application program, so that is put on the farmers' fields. From there, the wastewater is then going into our anaerobic lagoons. So this is just a visual. The photo is the visual of our pretreatment area along with our headworks of the anaerobic lagoons. The anaerobic lagoon system, again, this is going to stay the same in our new system versus the old. So we about 8 years ago we added a west anaerobic lagoon that gave us a total of approximately 18 million gallons of anaerobic treatment for the facility. It goes through three, we have a north, a south, and a west anaerobic lagoon, and it's split approximately equal based on the volumes of each of those. This process is really about taking the total TKN and turning it into ammonia so that it's available for the aerobic system that we have. Again, no changes to the anaerobic treatment system. But then moving on, this is where we start to make some changes. The photograph that you see on the left side of the page is our anaerobic lagoon clarifier. All of our water coming from the anaerobic lagoons has typically gone through that anaerobic lagoon clarifier before it goes to the aerobic system, or what that is actually going to be removed and replaced with a lift station and a screening system to help us screen some of the larger solids out. And then we have to put a lift station in because we're going to have to lift the water farther than gravity will allow us to. And so this will be a large lift station that's pumping all the wastewater to the new aerobic system. The existing system that we have is a 4-stage aeration system where we are just nitrifying all of the ammonia, turning it into nitrates. And so what we're going to be moving towards is an aerobic treatment system where we have an anoxic zone where we can denitrify. So all the wastewater coming in will go through an anoxic zone to help break the nitrates up and turn them into nitrogen gas. And from there, it will go into an aerated system where we will convert more of the ammonia into nitrates before it goes through our final stage of aerobic treatment. And the final stage of it is really broken down so that it can be 2 separate stages where we can either go anoxic in it or we can do it full aerobic treatment. This is really to help us have the capability to treat whatever's coming at it. So when you take a look at the drawing of what's there, there's 5 cells, and cells going from left to right, cells 2 and cell 5 are the anoxic zones. That the flow will be split between those two, come back around to cells 2 and 3, going in parallel with one another before it goes to the final section. Some interesting stuff that we're doing here, we're going from a diffuser-based aeration system to a jet-style aeration system. This is a more efficient way of getting air into the system for a couple of different reasons. You run into some what we call biofouling on diffuser-style aerators, and so we're going to be able to get rid of that. As a plant, we take it down. We on our non-harvest weekends, we will actually take down portions of the wastewater treatment system to clean each of these diffusers up. And by going with this style of aeration system, we're able to get we won't have to go into those tanks nearly as often, and so that's a real benefit for the plant. From the aeration system, we are going to go into what we call a membrane bioreactor. This is a big change from what we have currently. Currently we go through clarifier, final clarifier, where we separate the biomass from the water, and the clean water then goes on to disinfection, and all of the biomass, all the bugs that are in there, all the solids that are in there separate out, and we either use those as return seed for the aeration system, or we will waste the bugs. We will actually put them on a press and take all the water away from them and then use them as a biosolid. The membrane bioreactor is a form of microfiltration. So what we'll see is a significant improvement in turbidity and total TSS leaving the plant, and this is because that microfiltration is much more effective than using gravity to get the bugs to fall out. From there, we will take the fresh water coming out of the clean water out of the MBR, and it will go through disinfection, but rather than using a chlorination style disinfection like we're using right now, we're going to be using UV, ultraviolet, and so reduction of use of chlorination in the system, which is going to be a pretty exciting step forward for us as well. So, you know, overall, some significant benefits to the wastewater treatment plant. We're going to see, you know, substantial reductions in ammonia, nitrates, and TSS and BOD along the way. It's a significant investment in the facility. We're looking at about a $30 million wastewater treatment plant over the next 2 years. And its updated design will help us grow into the future. And like I said, I mean, I have a passion for maintaining Smithfield in this community, and this is a part of our sustainability efforts to make sure that we're moving forward. Photos that you see here are actually photos that were taken during our when we participated in the Big Sioux cleanup here a month and a half back. So, all right, how am I doing for time? It's pretty darn good.
Not bad, we're right on time.
All right, moving forward, just wanted to talk a little bit about some of our community involvement items that we do have going on. Just last week, folks may have heard about the donation that we provided to the LINK, the Community Triage Center. Excited about that and demonstrating our partnership in the community. In addition, we have, as a facility, we have a long-standing partnership with United Way, where we've collected nearly $10 million over the last 20 years to help support the United Way causes in our community. We've been a part of the local community for more than 110 years. We're one of the largest pork-producing facilities in the country, and we supply nearly 130 million servings of food per week, employ more than 3,700 individuals, and purchasing from more than 550 independent family farms through the region. So we are, we know that we are a big player and a big part of the local community, and we take that responsibility very very seriously. We live here, we work here, and we're committed to being a good neighbor. So that is the last of my slides. So we're open to questions.
Yeah, so if there's anybody that wants to post some questions, we've gotten a couple, but we will have quite a bit of time for people to ask any, you know, they touched on some stormwater stuff, they touched on wastewater stuff. So if you have any questions of these two gentlemen, make sure that you jump in the chat and ask it, and I will make sure to get it to them. So the first one is about biosolids, and it's just asking about what kind of seasonal limitations you have with handling them. And if there are seasonal limitations, do you store them or do they end up in the landfill?
You want it or you want me to do it?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so there is some seasonality to our ability to apply the biosolids. We have year-round fields that we can go to, and then we get into times of the year where it's either too wet to apply or crop cover doesn't allow us, and we have some storage locations that are that we partner with our contractor, Environmental Land Management, to store those biosolids for the season when they can be applied. But we do 99% of our biosolids are applied on an annual. Last year it was 99% of them were, so we do a good job of ensuring that we have them on good storage areas where they when we do have to store it. So.
And the next question would be about the stormwater and the new installation of the hog barn with the underground detention facility now in place there and the surrounding areas. What kind of maintenance plan do you anticipate to make sure that there's no unwanted discharges out of that underground system?
So it's still a brand new system to us, but we have it prepared to do inspections to see what kind of buildup we get into there, and then we do have a plan as far as cleaning it. We don't know how frequently we're going to have to do that yet due to the system being brand new, but it is we are inspecting it to see what we get for buildup in there.
It's been a pretty cool project. I mean, when we take a look at our TSS that's coming out of them, it's really quite outstanding how well they're treating it. It's a good stormwater detention program for us that is helping us keep our TSS low.
So have you done some monitoring locally here after installing it, or is that stuff based on other installations at other plants?
No, that's based on our stormwater sampling that we've done.